Spartan Warriors. Spartan warriors are not remembered only because they won battles, but because they turned an entire city into a war machine. From childhood, Spartan boys were pulled away from comfort and pushed into the agoge, a training system designed to break fear, hunger, pain, and weak obedience. Sparta was not trying to create brilliant soldiers one by one. No, it was trying to create men who could move like a single wall of bronze. Their strength was not wild individual madness, but collective discipline. On the battlefield, the Spartan hoplite advanced with shield, spear, helmet, armor, and one simple idea: if the line broke, everyone could die. And that is why the shield mattered so much. It did not protect only the man carrying it, it protected the man to his left. Spartan fame exploded during the Persian Wars, especially at Thermopylae, where King Leonidas and a small Greek force resisted the Persian advance. Historically, it was not only 300 men, but the image survived because it captured what Sparta wanted to represent: few against many, discipline against numbers, death before surrender. The Spartans did not conquer the world like Rome, and they did not build an empire as vast as Persia, but their name became a word for extreme toughness. That was their most lasting victory, not being the most numerous, but seeming impossible to break. Persian Immortals. The Persian Immortals were the most famous elite unit of the Achaemenid Empire, the massive power that stretched from Anatolia to Egypt and deep into Central Asia. Their name came from a terrifying idea: they always seemed to number 10,000. If one man died, became sick, or was removed, another took his place. And to the enemy, the unit still looked complete, as if it could not shrink. That made them more than soldiers. They were a symbol of imperial continuity. While other armies depended on specific kings, cities, or campaigns, the Immortals represented the empire itself, walking toward battle. They carried spears, bows, light shields, and armor suited for mobility. They did not fight like Greek hoplites, locked inside a wall of bronze. No. They were part of a wider Persian system that could combine infantry, cavalry, archers, engineering, logistics, and political terror. To their Greek enemies, Persia was the giant of the East, and the Immortals were its most recognizable face. At Thermopylae, they were sent against the Greek defenders when the first attacks were not enough. They did not smash through the Spartan line from the front, but that is not the whole story. The Persians were not weak because they did not fight like Greece. Their power came from scale, organization, and the ability to return again and again. The Immortals were not called immortal because they could not die. They were called immortal because the empire refused to show that it could bleed. Samurai. The samurai were the warrior class of feudal Japan, but calling them soldiers undersells what they truly were. They were painters, poets, philosophers, and some of the deadliest swordsmen the world has ever produced. Their code was called Bushido, the way of the warrior. Bushido demanded total loyalty to their lord, even beyond death. If a samurai's lord died or was dishonored, the samurai was expected to perform ritual suicide, seppuku, rather than continue living without purpose. For a samurai, the worst possible death was not dying in battle. No, it was dying without meaning. And that fear became their engine. Their weapon, the katana, was not simply a sword. Japanese swordsmiths considered it a sacred object. The forging process, folding the steel again and again to eliminate impurities, produced a blade sharp enough to cut through bone on the first strike without stopping. A samurai spent his entire life training across multiple disciplines at the same time: swordsmanship, archery, horseback combat, unarmed fighting, and strategy. They meditated. They practiced calligraphy. They composed poetry about death. They were expected to master the act of dying as completely as the act of killing. At the Battle of Sekigahara in 1600, the largest battle in Japanese history, more than 160,000 samurai clashed in a single day. Their class was officially abolished by the Japanese government in 1876. Some refused to accept it. They had been warriors their entire lives. And for many of them, there was only one possible response. They died as they had lived. Roman legions. The Romans changed everything. A Roman legion was not simply an army, it was a machine. A perfectly organized, relentlessly efficient war machine, built to operate the same way in every battle, on every terrain, in every season, and in every climate. Each legionary carried a javelin called the pilum, specifically engineered to bend on impact so the enemy could not pick it up and throw it back. Behind that came the gladius, a short, stabbing sword designed for brutal, close-range killing, and beside it a large, curved shield that locked with neighboring shields to form a moving wall of iron. They marched up to 30 kilometers per day in full armor, and at the end of every march, they built a fully fortified camp, every night, without exception. Their signature formation, the testudo, the tortoise, had soldiers locking shields overhead and on all sides, creating a moving fortress that arrows and stones simply bounced off. For 500 years, if Rome pointed its legions at a civilization, that civilization usually lost. They conquered Gaul. They conquered Britain. They crossed deserts. They crossed mountains. Not because of any single brilliant general, but because the system worked even without one. Any competent commander with Roman legions was dangerous. That was the point. But there was one exception. In 9 AD, 3 Roman legions, approximately 20,000 men, marched into a forest in northern Germania. A Germanic chieftain named Arminius had spent years inside the Roman army, learning its tactics from within. And then, he led them into an ambush. None of the 20,000 walked out, but everywhere else, Rome won. Viking Berserkers. Not all Vikings were berserkers. Most Viking warriors were farmers, traders, and sailors who raided foreign coasts when the season allowed. Dangerous, yes, but human. Berserkers were something different. They were the absolute elite of the Norse world, and they went into battle wearing nothing but the skin of a wolf or a bear. No armor, no shield, just fury. Before a battle, they entered a trance-like state that ancient sources struggled to describe, foaming at the mouth, shaking uncontrollably, biting their own shields, eyes completely wild, completely insensible to pain or fear. Modern historians believe this state, called the Berserker Gang, may have been triggered by certain psychoactive mushrooms, by extreme psychological conditioning, or by a combination of both. Whatever the cause, the result was something enemies found almost impossible to face. A berserker didn't fight with strategy. He attacked everything in front of him until it stopped moving. He absorbed wounds that would have dropped any other man and kept going. Norse sagas describe single berserkers killing dozens of fully armored warriors in one engagement. Entire enemy formations reportedly broke and fled simply at the sight of berserkers approaching across the battlefield. They were so dangerous, so completely unpredictable, that medieval Scandinavian law eventually banned them from towns during peacetime. They were legally forbidden from entering cities because even allied populations were afraid of them. Their name has survived more than 1,000 years. When we say someone has gone berserk, we are still talking about these men. Knights Templar. Knights Templar were monks. They were also the most feared heavy cavalry in the medieval world, and they were destroyed in a single night by the king they had served. The Knights Templar were founded in 1119 with a simple purpose: to protect Christian pilgrims traveling to Jerusalem. They took vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. They wore white mantles marked with a red cross, and in battle they were terrifying. Unlike most medieval knights who fought for personal glory, for plunder, for their own honor, Templars were trained to fight as one obedient religious unit. That made them something rare in an age of chaotic, disorganized warfare. A Templar cavalry charge was a precisely timed operation. They advanced at a controlled pace, then accelerated to a full charge at exactly the right moment. When it hit, it could break a line apart. They were forbidden from retreating unless outnumbered more than 3-1. Some accounts suggest they refused even then. Saladin, one of history's greatest military commanders, considered the Templars his most dangerous enemies. When he captured Templar knights, he had them executed immediately. He knew that releasing them meant facing them again in battle. Their end, however, did not come from an enemy on the battlefield. In 1307, King Philip IV of France, who owed enormous debts to the order, ordered the arrest of every Templar in France on the same night. Their leaders were tortured, forced to confess to crimes they had not committed, and burned at the stake. The last Grand Master, Jacques de Molay, reportedly cursed both the king and the pope from the flames. Both men were dead within a year. Mongol Horse Archers. No army in history ever conquered more territory than the Mongols. At their peak, the Mongol Empire stretched from Korea to Eastern Europe. And the weapon that built it was not the sword, not the siege engine, not the catapult. It was a man on a horse with a bow. Mongol warriors learned to ride before they were old enough to walk long distances. They learned archery at the same age other children were learning to stand in line. By adulthood, a Mongol horse archer could fire 10 accurate arrows per minute at full gallop, in every direction, including backwards. Their most devastating tactic was the feigned retreat. They would attack, take fire, then turn and flee, making the enemy believe they were winning. When the enemy formation collapsed to give chase, the Mongols would wheel around, regroup, and destroy them from every side. It worked, repeatedly, against armies across Asia, Persia, Russia, Poland, and Hungary. Cities that surrendered were spared. Cities that resisted were completely destroyed. Word spread across a continents. Entire populations opened their gates without a fight, simply because they had heard what happened elsewhere. Genghis Khan's campaigns are estimated to have killed 40 million people. Some historians believe the global population actually dropped because of them. The Mongols were never decisively defeated on the battlefield by a superior army. What stopped them was the death of Genghis Khan, internal division, and occasionally the weather. Aztec, Eagle, and Jaguar. They were trained to capture the enemy alive. In Aztec religion, the gods required constant human sacrifice to maintain the world's existence. The sun needed blood to rise again. And the most valuable offering, the one that honored the gods most, was a living enemy warrior, taken in the chaos of battle. This required a level of skill that most warriors never achieve. Killing is relatively straightforward. Capturing a fully armed enemy alive is not. Eagle warriors wore elaborate costumes of eagle feathers, with open-beak helmets that covered their faces. Jaguar warriors dressed in actual jaguar skins, spots and all. To the enemy, facing them felt less like facing men, and more like facing something that had stepped out of a nightmare. Earning the rank of Eagle or Jaguar warrior required a specific achievement, capturing at least 4 enemy warriors in battle. When the Spanish arrived in 1519 under Hernán Cortés, the Eagle and Jaguar warriors were the fiercest resistance they encountered. But they had a fundamental problem. They were trained to capture. The Spanish were there only to kill. Cortés allied with dozens of tribes who hated the Aztecs, dismantled the empire in 2 years. The Eagle warriors fought to the very end. But capturing an enemy is difficult with a sword. It is nearly impossible when he carries a musket. 8 units, 8 different ways to create fear. The Spartans turned discipline into a human wall. The Persian Immortals made an empire look inexhaustible. The samurai mixed beauty, death, and political power. The Roman legions transformed war into imperial routine. Viking Berserkers pushed psychological terror to the extreme. The Templars united prayer, sword, and medieval wealth. Mongol Horse Archers made speed into a form of destruction. And Aztec Eagle and Jaguar warriors turned war into prestige, religion, and domination. They were not all the same. Some won through formation, others through mobility, others through faith, fury, symbols, or fear. But all of them left something behind, an image so strong that it still works centuries later. Because the most famous military units do not survive only because of the battles they won. They survive because, when we hear their names, we can still imagine the enemy watching something approach. that he did not know how to stop.